Here we are. How are you doing? Happy Sunday. So, if you are here for the first time or you haven't been here for a few weeks, we are in the middle of the book called Living Untethered, Beyond the Human Predicament by Michael Singer. If you don't have the book, you can still feel like you get what you want to get out of this Sunday morning because we just pull nuggets from here and discuss them. But I highly recommend this book. This book is an experience, and for those of you that may have gotten it on Audible, I would say order a copy as well, because I'm usually an Audible person. I love doing it one or two times through Audible and then grabbing the book and just dissecting it. But for me, for this one, it is entirely different if I'm doing it on Audible than if I am holding the book in my hand. I feel like we have a bird flying through the sanctuary, do we? Did anyone just see a bird? Interesting. So I would just encourage you, if you're in one mode and you're not as into the book, flip into another mode and see what's there. But we have been in this series, and you can check out the past ones on our YouTube channel or on the app. And we are about midway through our journey. We also have small groups that gather each week to discuss it in depth. And if you don't have a small group, but you want to dive in a little more, the after-service group that meets on Zoom every single Sunday is talking about the book and anything that comes up in the Sunday talks. So, to get started today, we are in the section titled Thoughts and Dreams. Thoughts and dreams. Last week, Michael Singer posed the question of what are we doing with our minds? Your mind. What are you doing with it? Probably not something you think about very often. What am I doing with my mind? What do you mean? What am I doing with my mind? Well, when you dive into his work, he really is masterful. It's showing us how we generally, typically use our minds and what's possible, what the brilliant mind is that we've been given and what can happen with that mind, and how we tend to allow our minds to become consumed with the human condition and the human predicament. In today's section, he says that we have an impersonal mind, the abstract mind, the purely intellectual mind, but we often don't use that mind. We often get stuck in the personal mind. He says we get lost in our personal thoughts, making these thoughts about yourself the total meaning of your life. Think about that for just a moment. We make thoughts about ourselves the total meaning of our lives. Even if we're thinking about others or the world around us, we do that. Because we're thinking about it in relation to ourselves, in relation to how does this feel to me that the world is like this? Is it meeting my needs? Is it not meeting my needs? Is it meeting my picture? Is it not meeting my picture? Does it fulfill the vision that I have or does it not? But it always comes back to me. How do I feel about it? He takes a deep dive in this section, going into what it really means to have personal thoughts and to be so consumed by them. He says, once you create thoughts about what you want and don't want and how to force the world to be that way, you will never be okay inside. That's the bad news. You will lose much of the great power of abstract thought because you cannot abstract from yourself. Life will become a battle between reality and your mental preferences. This use of mind is called the personal mind because its thoughts are all about you and your concepts, your views, and preferences. He goes on to say, the teachings of mindfulness, which center awareness on the current moment, encourage you to focus on something other than the personal mind. Focusing on the moment is one way to get your consciousness off the incessant addiction to the personal. We don't think of ourselves as having an addiction to the personal. But that's what it is when we're constantly looking at life according to whether or not it's fulfilling our preferences, whether it's making us comfortable or joyful, or whether it's making us uncomfortable. And he says there's another way of being. He says another way to transcend the personal mind is by using your intellectual mind to create and do things that are not personal in nature. I got this on a deeper level when reading this section, that the master teachers, saints, and sages throughout time have decided to set their minds on something else. What is ordinary is setting your mind on your own being, or setting your mind on the preferences of your being, whether or not it's interacting with the world around you, or it's just in your own mind, your own thoughts, your own dreams, or the world you experience through your senses. But there is a way to live an extraordinary life, and it is to set your mind upon something higher. Now, in whatever language that could be to you, it could be set your mind on God. That's what a lot of the Catholic saints would say. It could be set your mind on source, set your mind on love, set your mind on life, set your mind on spirit. But the mind is a creative thing. Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, Unity's co-founders, taught about the mind and how we can use the mind, that the mind is a great crucible. It is this fascinating, amazing thing that we can utilize and use, but until we learn it, it uses us. And we end up using it to create a heaven or a hell, just like any other instrument on earth. We can use it for good or we can use it for error. We can use it to bring us together. We can use it to separate. We can use it to obsess about our own selves, or we can dedicate it to a higher purpose and the greater good. And I got a deeper sense when diving into this section this week about what service really is. We think about service as giving. We think about serving as giving to something outside of ourselves, right? That's greater than ourselves. But the highest service is dedicating the mind to that. Can I set my mind on something higher? Because what is ordinary is setting our minds on what is mine, what is me. What does my group have? What does my family need? What about my country, my experience, my home, my whatever it is? You fill in the blank. Whatever it is that your mind goes through, what is the mine? My perception, my perspective, my needs, my wants. He goes on to say, the mind is great. It's just not supposed to be used for storing all your personal preferences and then thinking the whole world is supposed to match what you stored. And that's what we do. And then we become discontent or unhappy. The outside world is simply not going to magically match what you've stored in your mind. What? The outside world is just simply not going to match what you've stored in your mind. I bet there are some of you, if you're reading this book with us, that read that part and go, that's not unity. In unity, we teach that if we hold a thought in mind, there is a creation, that we are a part of birthing our reality. That's not unity. The outside world is simply not going to magically match what you've stored in your mind. But I thought that affirmations and denials were that I would work on myself and my mind, and when I do, things will magically appear, right? Who's had that work all the time? There's a deeper practice there, yes and no. And I don't think this statement contradicts unity. I think it alludes to the deeper practice of unity. That everyone who came alive using the principles of the unity movement experienced on a deep level. Because the unity principles and understanding the law of mind action, that thoughts held in mind create after their kind, doesn't just use those teachings and those principles to start painting only pretty pictures and going, it has to magically appear or else I'm going to be unhappy. I think Charles and Myrtle had a key that was deeper. And that key is that through the practice, through having faith and through having non-resistance, you enter into a space of flow, the flow of life. And when you enter the space of the flow of life, when you enter an unconditional relationship with life, then applying that principle can flower out amazing things in our lives. But we can use that principle in self-destructive ways when we use it like it's magic. But I'm thinking these affirmations, I'm holding these positive things, I'm working on my perception and my perspective, and the world is not matching what I want. Then we actually begin to focus on the gap between what is in our hearts and what we want and the life we're seeing, the reality we're seeing, and we become at war with what is. And that, in fact, is not the practice and not the principle. He says, in fact, it's not very intelligent to expect it to magically match what you've stored in your mind. It's really intelligent to devote your life to fighting with life so it aligns with your past good and bad experiences? How can you enjoy life when you're always worrying and struggling to get your way? That's what all of our societies are doing, and that's what almost every human being has done. People just haven't evolved enough to learn not to do that. Rich people, poor people, sick people, healthy people, married people, single people, they're all bound in the same way. If they get what they want, they are relatively okay. That makes sense to me. If I get what I want or I like what I get, I feel more okay. If I don't, I'm not okay. Part of the human predicament. It's okay to stay there and to live a whole life like that. But we can see when we hear it phrased like this, that there's a better way to live. He says if they don't get what they want, they suffer to a greater or lesser extent. Fortunately, you do not have to live this way. There is a much higher way to live life, but it requires you change how you interact with your mind and with the life unfolding before you. It changes how you interact with your mind and the life unfolding before you. And that takes work, and it takes being uncomfortable, and it takes watching our mind, and it takes interacting with our reality. I just took my little one camping, my 4-year-old, and I had her, I noticed she had a play, on her play tent that she could undo and do the poles. So I thought, well, you can now help set up the tent and take down the tent. And so she was taking down the tent, and she's working on the poles, getting it all done. And she said to me, Mama, this is the hardest camping trip ever. And I looked at her and I said, that's because you're helping. It's great for me. The work that we do is sometimes hard. Sometimes it makes life feel hard. But it is great for you, and it is great for everyone around you. It is great for the world. It is great for the godness that surrounds all of us, because when we do this work, we are part of our soul emanation. We are part of what has brought us here. We are aligned with the higher self. So it may be hard work. Michael Singer says, the foundational choice we have in life is either constantly control life to compensate for our blockages or devote our lives to getting rid of our blockages. Which choice do we want to make? Do we want to constantly try to control life, to compensate for our blockages, compensate for all of those past experiences that were good and that were bad, that we're trying to navigate life, trying to go through the fear of missing out, or trying to get what we want so that we don't feel uncomfortable, so that as far as we can tell, I'm going to like this? Or do we want to turn around and look within and start lifting and moving the blockages that we have? He says, you are holding all that personal stuff inside your mind, the good, the bad, and the ugly. The inevitable result is that if the moment in front of you happens to align with your stored patterns, you feel great. You feel open, excited, and enthused. If it does not align with your stored patterns, you get upset. You immediately close, get defensive, and maybe even get depressed. Now we're back to the question, what's it like to live in there, inside of your being? Sometimes it's nice, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's heaven, sometimes it's hell. This is why. It's not because God made it that way. You did this. Is that unity? That's the core of unity. The realm of godness has been given to each one of us. It's ours to understand the laws and principles that govern the spiritual universe and to apply them for better living. He says, you were given free will, and what you did with your free will was make a mess out of your mind. Ugh. Instead of being in awe of the moment in front of you that even exists, you fight with it to make it match what you want. One of my greatest wake-up calls when coming into Unity, walking into the Unity of Boulder so many years ago, was that each week I'd go, I didn't realize I was doing that. I thought that was being done to me. And those wake-up calls can feel like hard work. But when we really get it, when we really see what's happening in our own minds, it is freeing. He goes on to describe part of my practice. He says, you're trying to figure out how each choice will make you feel later. Ooh. And he goes into this whole little diatribe about it. Does anyone else do that? When you're trying to make choices, trying to decide which direction to go, what to do, what next, what to pay attention to, what to feed, what to source. How is it going to make me feel later, right? That's so common. That's how we make decisions, isn't it? There's another way. Discernment. Set your mind on something else. Not your personal preferences of what's happened in the past and thinking, if I can just avoid what I don't like from the past and get more of what I did like from the past, then I will be okay. Nothing on the outside is ever going to make us okay or not okay. It's a little disappointing, but when we really get that, it changes everything. Because we realize that we have it all right in here. He says that there's another way. What else would we do? How about live in reality and enjoy the moments that are unfolding in front of you? That's what else you can do. Use your mind to be creative, inspiring, and do great things. Don't let the mind always be thinking about itself and what it wants. Learn to enjoy life as it is, instead of limiting the ways you can enjoy it to serve your past impressions. I think this part is a key in Unity. I think our co-founders got that. They didn't use the principles because they were in resistance of the life that was in front of them, because they were in the resistance of the present moment so that they could fix it and make it better. They were in harmony with the present moment, and they used the law of mind action and the principles. They used the idea of our thoughts and our feelings, our mind-heart coherence. They used that to create greater things, but not to say, what's in front of me is not okay. Let me magically change it. Linda Martella-Witt did a sermon here one Sunday, and she's a Unity minister who's been in our movement for quite some time, and she shared a quote from our Unity teachings about affirmations and denials, and she really opened a door for so many people because some folks use affirmations in a way that it's like taking something that's not true and making it true. Like if I magically hold on to something that's not true enough, I'll make it true. And she said affirmations at their core, from the beginning of our Unity teachings, were statements of truth. That's why we could say them. That's why we affirm them. Not because they're not true, because there is a realm in which they are absolutely true. We live in an abundant universe. Could I have an empty bank account and say I am prosperous? Absolutely, it's true. I live in an abundant universe. That's a statement of truth. Now, maybe if I said my bank account has $100,000 in it, that might not be a truth statement. And she said the beginning of affirmations was to bring the truth statements into our being, to harmonize them so they go into the subconscious level, so they go into all of our being, and we begin to believe in the truth, not a magical other reality that we're trying to make happen. It's the depths of the teachings. When we don't do this, when we continue to satiate the addiction of the mind, to oscillate between craving and aversion, Michael Singer says, eventually you catch on that you've developed an entire intellectual model of how every single thing needs to be. How people should behave, how your spouse should be dressed when you're going out, how much traffic there should be. How many things do you do this about? Pretty much every single thing. You honestly believe that what you made up is how it should be. The truth of the matter is, that's absurd. So he goes on to talk about being in the present moment and being in non-resistance and not making what the outside world is, not making it so wrong that we can't even sit with it or be in peace. And that's about having faith. Having faith that there is a greater activity, a greater intelligence at work, and becoming part of that, setting our minds on that. If we have faith plus affirmations, we have peace. If we have affirmations plus preferences, we tend to have disappointments. If we put together affirmation, preference, and resistance, we often have suffering. Charles and Myrtle Fillmore had the depth of practice, the depth of being in the present moment, allowing what is, and setting the mind on greater things. Michael Singer puts it in this way. He says, we best leave reality to either science or God, not to everyone's individual preferences. Some of us have gotten to that place, even in our own prayer life, that we just say this or something better. Let thy will be done. That it's like, I don't even want to go there, and what I think will make me happy. Some of the things that I think I wanted, I ended up not wanting. Some of the things I thought I didn't want that might have been, oh, no, not that, ended up being the greatest gifts and blessings of my life. Are we going to surrender to the personal mind or to the analytical mind? He goes on to say in the next section that we have some tools, and he talks about our thoughts, and he talks about our dream state. When he talks about our thoughts, he talks about how we can consciously, and this is the affirmations and denials, how we can consciously, willfully make the mind think something, right? Decide what you want to think, decide what you want to picture, say it right now, and you can do it. You have that thought. But the majority of our thoughts are automatically generated. And the practice and the principle in unity is about going to the place where we can have willful thoughts and harmonizing with them. allowing ourselves to understand our thinking patterns so much that we recognize them, but we don't necessarily buy into them. Because the tendency in the human condition is to hear our own thoughts and believe them. And he puts this in this section with dreams, because who believes their dreams? How many of you have a dream and then you're really concerned about that dream? Like you're really concerned that it's either true or going to affect your life, right? You know that the dream is a projection of the mind. And he goes into the idea that so are your thoughts a projection of the mind. The thoughts that you have are not you. The thoughts we have are our way to witness our preferences of the past, our resistance, positive, negative. It's our ways of seeing what thoughts are held in mind, seeing what's under there, so that we can process it, so we can lift it up, so that we can apply affirmations, so that we can dive in. When we look at the dream state, when we look at the things that happen in our mind, we don't think we have much control over them, right? I mean, you just have your dreams, right? Whatever they were, you just have them. Sometimes we don't even know we had them. We know we have them, but we don't remember them, and we're not concerned at all about that. So can we take that and apply it to our thoughts as well? Not be so concerned about them, but recognizing our thoughts are a place where we work out our energies, where we work out our limitations. And he invites us into that idea that both with the dreams and with our thoughts, we can dive into them and begin to understand ourselves more. With our thoughts, he says, a meaningful question is, why did that possible reason come up versus any other? When you're having an experience and you have a reaction, why did you have the reaction that you did? Because we know you can have 50 people experience the same thing and they'll all have different reactions, yes? He gives an example, something like someone's late at some point in your childhood, someone's late. And then all the other times that someone's late, you have a build on from that experience. So if that person was late because, say, there was a car accident and someone passed, that anytime someone's late, you may start having anxiety. But say that person was late and you were given a birthday party. When they got there and you figured out why they were late, it was because they were doing something special for you. Then in the future, when late comes up, there may be a tingling, there may be an excitement, or it may be neutral. That's why we're not all living the same life. And when we watch those patterns, when we see it, we can learn more about ourselves and become more interactive in our own experience. And the same thing with the dream state. He talks about the subconscious mind, and he talks about a yoga master teacher who said that you can work off karma in your dreams. That by going through an experience in your dreams, it's actually beneficial to your spiritual evolution. You're at least allowing some blocked energy to release that you didn't allow while you were awake, and it's healthy. He goes on to talk about, just as your body is always trying to heal itself, so your mind is always trying to release these impurities that are stuck there. Unfinished energy stores in your mind. It's stored in your mind, and it's always trying to release at one level or another, through your thoughts, through your dreams. And he says this, the common thread between your waking and dreaming state is that it's the same consciousness that is aware of both. You who is watching the dream is the same you who is watching your waking thoughts and experiencing the outside world. My little one had a nightmare the other night, and she woke up in the middle of the night, and I could tell she was having a nightmare. She woke up in the middle of the night, and I asked her about it. I said, you know, you're having a dream. And she just sat up, and she said, I'm done with that dream. I'm done with that dream. We can be done with that which is no longer serving us. When we begin to understand the levels of mind and the experiences of mind, and we begin to interact with mind. I sent her back to sleep with a little lesson on lucid dreaming. Okay, well, you can do this. Take it in this direction. You don't just have to experience it, and that's the gift of unity. Michael Singer says it's so important to understand this. You have set up a system in which you can't win. You have expanded what can bother you to include all experiences that remind you of what bothered you before. What is more, life almost never totally satisfies you because everything has to be exactly as you want it, to a T. This shows you the power of past and present preferences. The more preferences you have, the less you will be okay. Fortunately, he goes on to say, there is a way out. It's called witness consciousness. If you can learn to sit back and simply watch the voice inside your head, you can free yourself. This is not about shutting up the voice. Don't ever fight with your mind. You're the one who did this to your mind. How dare you complain about the mind? Of course not. You change your behavior. There are billions of things, he says, that can happen in life that don't match your preferences, and there are only a few that do. Under these conditions, the probability that life is going to be a negative experience is extremely high. It's not because life is negative. It's because the only thing that isn't negative to you is that which matches exactly your preferences. So let's take a deep breath. Are we ready to allow the mind to do what the mind does and to become the witness, whether it's the waking state or the dreaming state, the thoughts, the feelings, or the dreams? As Michael Singer said, how about live in reality? Enjoy the moments that are unfolding in front of you. Use your mind to be creative, inspiring, and do great things. Let's take that into meditation. Right here, right now, we inhale and exhale. Allowing ourselves to become present to the self that's in there, the observer, the witness that's way back there. The one that doesn't need life to be flashy or to match human preferences. The one that knows that it knows that it knows that it is always okay. The one that lives in a field of possibility, in intelligence, life, creativity. Inhaling and exhaling. Mind, body, and spirit. We allow ourselves to release any patterns, habits, thoughts, energies that no longer serve us. We're willing to see them. We're not so afraid of them that we close our eyes and turn away and push them into the recesses of the mind. We can allow them to be seen. Like ghosts on Halloween that are for dress up and play. That we recognize we made. We found the costume, we put it on. That we're the one dressing up our thoughts. that this intelligent system is the one dressing up our dreams, and that this too is for our healing, this too is for our evolution, this too is for our growth, our expansion. So peace, be still. As we breathe in to the one who witnesses, the one who is one with the breath of life. Inhaling and exhaling. We center in on that state of peace. Allowing in the fullness of the present moment, the beauty and the wonder of life and being alive. By the power of this practice, may all beings have freedom from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings know they are born blessed and here to be a blessing. May all beings know God as love and themselves as emanations of this love. Namaste.